Welcome back. In our last lecture, we have seen the basic concept of React.js. In that, we have seen what are components, what are the props, states, redux, and routing in general. We have also seen how to create a sample application using create React app. In this lecture, we will uh, see how we can create different type of components, how can we pass on data between components, how data can be saved into the components using states or other variables. So we will also see the routing part of our components. In the first part, we will see the components, creation of components, and the movement of data in it. Let's start. Let's see the components. There are two type of components. One are called the stateless components, and other are the stateful components. Stateless components are getting their stateless components or stateless functions. Stateless functions are those functions which take two parameters and provide the output same sort of output every time. If you give the same type of input every time, like for example, this function uh, a comma b, if we provide the value of a 10 and b 2, it will provide us 12 every time we call it. So which implies that a function returns all time the same thing exactly on what is given to it. If we give first time the 10 and second time 10 and third time 10, it will not make any difference. It will provide us back 12 each time. But let's take another example in which if we give 10 first time, it will provide us 11 as an output. If we give 10, so every time we pass on a, it will increment the value and provide us a next value. Such type of functions are called stateful functions that maintain the information in shape of state and provides updated information every time. So we have two type of functions, stateless functions and stateful functions, and based on these two functions, React has created its component, which are the stateless as well as stateful. We will see what are the stateless functions and stateless components, and how we create a stateful function components. The most basic type of React component is one without state. The first one, React components that are pure functions of their props or do not require any internal state management can be written as simple JavaScript function. They are said to be stateless functions. Let's go ahead and see the examples of both. So we have two type of components in our React. One is called the functional components, and second are the class-based components. Functional components are stateless. They don't save any state. They don't need to save any state information into its variables. So alternatively, those are stateless. Can use props sent from calling function. So these type of functions actually use the props which are passed through to those components. So they use those props to calculate or whatever they want to perform and return the value. So those are our functional components. While if we need the state, if we need to save the information into our state variables, then we cannot do this using the functional components. To do this, we have to call class based component. We will create a class based component that will be a stateful function, stateful basically class, and we can use this information within that class, and we can pass that information as a props to other class or other function, etc. And definitely it can also utilize the props sent by its parents. Let's see how functional components, we can create the functional components, and how we can create the class based components. This is an example of functional components. In it, this is basically arrow type of function. What we are doing, we are naming the function and passing the props which is sent by the parents. And in the function, what we are returning, we are returning a simple h1 heading with hello, and the props dot property. Props is an object which contains the property whatever sent by the component. For example, in this case, the Arun is sent to this component, so it will print hello Arun. This will be the output of this component. So that is the way out with which these components perform activities. So to create a functional component, what we have to write: import react from react. And after importing the react, we can use a function just like this. Function name, the props is the keyword which is an object that is sent by the parent, and we need to return some information from this component. What we are returning? A div with the props.content, whatever has been passed to it. For example, the content variable has been passed, so we can print that variable props.content into that div, and we are exporting this component as first component. So three major things you need to consider. One is the importing react, exporting this component, and the third thing is returning some JSX language information. You can call you can add HTML into it, you can add JSX syntax into it. We will see both. This is a simple example of functional component. Class-based component, we can create the class-based component by two syntaxes. One is basically ES6 syntax. This is the ES6 syntax, which is normally used into our class-based components. And you can use also a constant second class, react.create class, and you can call this. But I will explain this because normally you will find all the examples using this syntax. In it, what we are using, what we are doing, class, the name of the class, extends react.component or the component. You can write the component or react.component. I will show you how you can write react.component or simply component. It should have a class-based component, should have a renderer function into it. A renderer function which returns HTML. This part, the return part, is same as the functional component, but this return is encapsulated into a renderer function. So any class type of basically React component needs to render the information using the renderer function. So whatever we want to print on the screen, it should be the part of this renderer function that will be displayed onto our screen. Anything outside this renderer function will not be the part of our display. You have to call the information from this return variable, return function. So these are the two mechanisms with which we can create the class-based component. A React component can be defined as ES6 class that extends the base React.component class. In its minimal form, a class must define a renderer function. So renderer function is a compulsory function that specifies how the component renders to the DOM. The render method returns React nodes which can be defined using JSX syntax as HTML tags. So you can mix and match the JSX syntax as well as you can add the HTML tags into it. It's up to you. This is another example of simple component. In it, what we have: import React component from React. And what we are doing, class, the name of the class is hello world, extends component. Here I am using just the component. If I need to use react.component, then I will just import React from React. I can specifically import the component, or I can import React. It's up to us. If we specifically import the component, we can directly write the component here, and both methods work fine. Then we have a constructor method. It is just to display you that there you can add the constructor, and you know how to pass the props or to the parent, and super props and props. This, with this mechanism, the props passed back. Then the renderer function. In it, what we want to display, it is returning a simple hello world with head h1 tag. A component can also receive props. These are properties. You can see you haven't declared props here, but in the constructor you received the prop, and after receiving the props, you can use these props as this dot props dot the variable name. These are the property passed by its parents in order to specify some values the components cannot know by itself. A property can also contain a function. So a function can be passed as a prop that can be called by the component after a certain event occurs. For example, any mouse click on this function will alternatively can call the parent method accordingly. That is the basically function passing function as a props. For example, a button could receive a function for its on-click property and call it whenever it is clicked. When writing a component, its props can be accessed through the props object on the component itself. So this is the way out with which we can receive the props, and you can use the props this dot props dot the name onward. Now, how you can pass the props to your components. To passing the props to the component, you need to like we have created three components, three different type of components in last examples. You can see we have created a second component which is of one type of declaration. We have created a third component which is another type of declaration. We have created a first component which is of functional type of declaration. So two of class type declaration and one is of functional type declaration. But calling these functions components have the same way out. You can just call the name, you can provide the name, the first component, return first component, and you can pass the content second component, and you can pass the content is a variable. You can put it name, you can put it anything here. So you are passing this information to the basically called function. The second component will receive this information, first component will receive this information, and third component will receive this information. So by doing this, we are passing we are calling three different components with props, sending props as a content as a prop to them. Functional component cannot have state within them, so we can only pass the state props through calling that component. Then receiving that props into our components. To receive the props into the component, we have seen the example in functional that that props has been passed. Now we are seeing an example in case of class based component. In this we receive these props into our constructor, and after that we can use those props this dot name props dot name. So simply you can use this with props dot name. So name is the property that has been passed to this component, and props is an object which is a default object, and this means the scope of this class function. So by doing this, you can use any variable that has been passed by the parent into the function. But keep in mind, this component cannot change the value of this prop. The value of props can be changed from where it has been sent. You can change only the variables that has been declared within this component. The example above shows how the component can render an arbitrary string passed into the name prop by its parent. Note that a component cannot modify the props it received. It cannot change the value of this prop. It can be changed only by its parents. This is another example. We have a functional component, function welcome, which receives the props and returning the hello props.name. And we have another functional component, function app, which is returning what it is returning. It is calling welcome function three times using JSX syntax. It is calling function and passing Sarah, calling function and sending Waham, calling function welcome and calling and sending props Sharif. So what it will print on the screen? It will print basically hello Sarah, hello Maham, hello Sharif onto the screen. Three lines, three H1 headings. So a component can be called multiple times within one component. So this is the way out with which we can call other components into the component and pass on the props to that component. Now, state. State is the local information of the component. State basically local states. When React was first introduced, we were presented with the local state. The important thing to know about local state is that when a state value changes, it triggers a re-render. So we can save the information within a component using the state variable, and whenever the variable value will be changed, it will automatically re-render itself. You can say we have this dot counter is a variable, that is a state variable, and you can, whenever you set the value of this counter variable, it will automatically re-render itself and will display new thing. And you can also pass your state value to as a prop to the to other components, just like in this example child component, we are passing this dot state dot name as a name to the child component. The child will receive as a prop this information as a prop into it. State management. This example shows you a simple example, shows you how to save and how to utilize the states. This is basically a class-based component. We have declared the hello class. We have called the constructor, and after calling the constructor, we have passed the props to the super. Then we have declared a simple variable. It is not a state variable. It is a simple let variable, first name, and we have passed the props, part of the props, to this first name. And then this dot state, we have declared a state with the name and pass this simple variable into this name. We can also directly pass this props to this name also. So it's up to you. You can pass this directly to this, or this example was just to show you that you have three type of variables. One is of the prop type, second is a simple let function, let variable, and third is of a normal a state function, a state variable. So you can have three type of variable within a component. Then in a renderer method, what we are doing, we are returning the hello, the name of the person, this dot state dot name. So each component can have its own state or accept its parent state as a prop. So a parent can pass any information as a prop, and any component can contain its own state. And whenever the value of this state, the name will be changed, automatically this function will be re-rendered onto your screen. To set the new value, you have to call this dot set state, and in that you will pass the variable whatever you want to change. This is the variable of state variable which will be updated, and on updation it will re-render the screen in front of you. You can also you can also create a simple variable, as we have seen in last example. Any change in the value of a simple variable will not re-render anything, will not update the view accordingly. To update the view, you have to call a function that is called force update. It will forcefully update the rendering process. So it will re-render the information forcefully. So you can have the third type of variable, that is a simple variable. There are three variables, and I have differentiated with these three. Props a value sent by the calling component or the parent component. Called component cannot change the value. Calling component can change it. If calling component will change the value, the view of the called component or the child component will be automatically re-rendered. So keep in mind, any value passed by a parent to a child component will be named as props, and these props cannot be changed by the child. If the parent changes the value of the prop, the child component will re-render automatically. The second thing is the state. It is basically the internal variable of a component, and any change of value of state variable will re-render the view. You can pass these state variables as a props to other components also. The third thing is your normal variable, that you declare with let, constant, and etc. And the scope is limited, no impact on the view or change, can force view to update with force update function. Force update function will re-render itself automatically. So alternatively, you have three type of variables within React ecosystem. You can add the functions in a React component. To add a function, what you need to do, you have to declare the function outside renderer function. Within the render function, you cannot declare basically if you want to declare the method into a renderer function, you will declare it as a constant here, as a constant, and then you declare here. But if you declare outside this renderer method, then you have to bind this function also in the constructor. We are binding this dot handle click is equal to this dot handle click dot bind this. By doing this, you binded this handle click as a variable of this class. You can call this method as this dot handle click, this dot handle click. So on click, I am calling this dot handle click, and on calling this alternatively, this function will be executed. So this is the way out with which you can call any function within a React component. You can import and export anything in a React component. Like in this case, I'm exporting the module or a component. Sorry, not a module, a component with the name danger button. And this component is displaying or rendering a button with the color red. And we are importing a button. You can import using the import command, and you can export using the export command. Few things to understand. Every component, the information within a component, this one should be a single div. You can see I have defined a div, and anything within that will be displayed. You cannot display two different element means two divs independently. You have to encapsulate, you have to put another div in over that two divs. So a wrapping div should be there to send the view. So every component can return only one node at max. So it is better to put everything in one div block. You can divide the code within that, but over your code you should put a div for the wrapping. Same, component name should be in camel case. That means the first letter should be the capital. Else there can be an error. So be sure that your component name is basically a capital letter. Starting letter is a capital letter. So now what we need to do, we should go and create these components and see how this works. Let's move to our sample application which we have built. In that application, what I have created a folder component into the source. And what I have done, I have created an app.js which contains I have removed all other information. I just left with one div, and in that I have called a main component. Now I will create a main component here. I am creating a main component.js file. Other than that, I need to create two more files. For example, functional component, just to show you how functional components works, and one more class based component, class component.ts, sorry, js. So I have created three files. One is the main component.js, second is the functional component.js, and third is the class-based component class component.js. In my main component, this is the class which is my main class, which will call other classes also. So I will do the import. What I need to import is to React. With the React, I will import the component from, what I need to import from is from React. So I have imported React and component from React. After importing React, what I need to do, I have to declare a class. I'm naming this class as I have named that the main class into my app.js, so that's why I'm putting the name here. Name extends. Now I can write this simply the component, and writing the component I have created my class, and with that I will export default, and name of the class will be main. So I have created the class, and after creating the class I have exported it as a main. So after doing this, what I need to do is to call the constructor. Construct dash constructor, and in it, if we have any props that will be passed, we can have super, and we can pass back the props here. So we have passed the props, and after doing this, what we need to do, we need to call the renderer method, and renderer method we need to return anything here. For example, I want to return I want to return a div at first. Into that div I will return the h1 heading hello, I am main component. So what I did, I created a component which is our class type component, and into that component I have created a simple h1 heading which is displaying me actually that I am a main component. This is just a sketch of a component. After doing this, what I need to do, to provide a state information. For example, this is not compulsory to provide the state information, but just to let you know that how state information can be passed, I'm writing it for you. After closing this dot state sorry this dot state, we have to provide the name. For example, we are putting name, or we have seen a number of example of name, so we will take another example, the date. We are declaring a variable date, and the date will be of type javascript function date. So what we did, this dot state equal to uh, we have declared a variable this dot state, and in that we have declared the variable date, and that will be equal to new dot date, and that's all. We have created the constructor and a state variable into our basically class. Now we will use that class variable, state variable, like h2. What I want to display, time is this dot state dot date. So what we have done, we have basically created I am the main component, and time is this dot state dot name. Let's start this into our browser. Yarn start. Yarn start will run uh, our parent component, that is index.html, and into that index.html we have called the main component in app.js. You can see In app.js we have included this component. Sorry, the component name is main component.js, and we have included this. And after calling this component from main, we are actually, there is some issue. Let's see what are the issues. Date is equal to new dot. Okay, we have assigned wrongly. It should be colon. uh, yes, this is the way out. Sorry, it is difficult to remember the syntax itself. Objects are not valid as a React child. Okay, so there is another type of error. That time is actually not displayable in shape of this string variable. We have to convert it to provide it into JavaScript to local date, local time string, and we have converted this into local time string. Now you can see time is there. It has fetched the time is this one, and hello, I am on the main component. So I have changed the view. I have called my main component into this. After calling this main component, I will show you how to call a function. For example, we will call a function on a button. We are creating a button, and into that button on click equal to, and we will name the function. For example, this dot, at the moment we haven't anything this with this. We will name it as handle click. We have named it as handle click, and after naming it, what we are doing, uh, click me, we have created a button with a on click method. Whenever this will be clicked, this handle click will be called. Now we have to implement this handle click. To implement this handle click, we will go here, outside the renderer. We will call this method handle click, and in this handle click, for example, this method, we just we just alert the user. Alert, I'm clicked. As I'm just demonstrating you the function calls. Along with this, what I need to do, as I told you earlier, we have to bind this. To bind this, what you have to do is to provide this dot handle click equal to this dot this dot handle click dot bind this. This is the default way out with which it binds the function with the class. So after doing this, we have a button click me. Whenever you will click on this, it will be called. So we have called the function and bind that function within the class. And instead of using this dot instead of using the parentheses, we are just calling a variable, and that variable is actually a function, and we are binding that function into it. We have seen a class-based component in which we have created the state. We have used that variable into our component, and we have also shown how to create a function, and how to bind the function, and how to call the function. After that, now we will move towards a functional component. We will first implement our functional component, and after implementing the functional component, we will come back and call this function into our main function. To implement it, like import react from react, we have imported the react. We have declared our function as a constant, and it is a functional component. Just we are giving it a name which will receive the props from its parent, and after receiving the props, what it will do, it will return a div. Every component will return a single div. You cannot return more than one div. You can return multiple things within that div, but overall one div will be returned back. So I have provided here, I am saying hello, I am a functional component. Okay, and along with this, what we want to print is h2, I received the props name s, and we will print this dot props dot name. So what we are doing, whatever this component received from its parent, we have printing out that into our screen. And after doing this, what we need to do, we have to export this module, export default with a functional component. That's all. So we have created a functional components which is returning a simple h1 heading and h2 heading with the props the name. So we will call this component here. Hopefully it will automatically include it here. I have called the functional component, and I am passing a name with Rashid. So after these three values, I have called my functional components. If I go to the display, I cannot read property props. So into my this component, I could not display the property. There can be some spelling mistakes. Props dot, sorry, this is not a class, so it should not use this. This is my mistake. Functional component cannot have this. So hello, I'm a functional component. I save the props name as Rashid. So Rashid has been passed along with this main component. We have passed this props to functional component, and functional component displays at a props name. This is only used in case of classes, so that is my mistake. We should remove that. This next is our class based component. So I will just copy paste it to make it easy for me to write the whole code again and again. I'm just copying it and putting it here, and in the class. Now I will change here. I don't need functional component. The name of the class will be class component, and moreover I will change the state also. I don't need to bind this function. I will not use any function into this. Then I will not this one renderer. Hi, I am class based component, class based component. Okay, and after this class based component, what we need to do, we have to basically what I need to display is a variable name as name, and the variable value is for example Hamid. I have named it Hamid. You can put it in single quote and double quote, there is no difference into it. So I let's display hello, I am a class based component. My props values are my props values are as sent. Now here what we need, this dot props dot name. So this is the variable which is sent by my parent component. I will copy this. I will remove this also. I don't need to call the functional component into it. And my state value or state value is, and I will display this dot state dot name. You can see I intentionally put the name for the props, name for the state variable. And I will do one more thing. I will put let name is equal to Sajid. This is the third thing which I am doing. And what I can do is my normal variable is name. So after doing this, I have to call class based component with class. Sorry if what I have exported is right. Oh, sorry, I didn't export it right. Class component. So we have to export it rightly. Class component and name is equal to Rashid. We have called the class component as well, and it has automatically imported upside here. If it is not automatically exported, you can export it yourself, import it yourself. So after doing this, a class component is also there. So if we see the view, now you can see this is the main component which is displaying its own contents. I'm the main component, time, and then click on me function, which is a parent component. Then I have called the functional component. It has received the props as Rashid. Then I have a class based component. Class based component, I have defined three type of variables. You can see all three variables have the same variable name. You can see the name variable, name, state.name, and props.name. All three are the name variable, and you can display it accordingly. There is no issue. All three variables are of different type. So this is all. We can see how to create the components, how to create class based component, a functional based component, how to create the states, what are the states, and how to use those states. This is all from the first part. Now we will start the second part, in which we will perform the routing. Thank you very much.